Welcome to Cheater's Diary, where we dive deep into the messy truth of infidelity. We explore raw stories of cheating, affairs, relationship trauma, and the painful aftermath of a broken heart. You won't want to miss a moment. Stay glued. The City Hall Plaza was less a space of civic pride and more a boiling kettle of discontent. The midday sun beat down, but the heat of the protest, the rhythmic drumming, the unified chants of "no displacement, no peace," was hotter. Chloe Davis, a journalist whose reputation was built on forensic investigative reporting, weaved through the crowd. Her focus was on documenting the raw, unvarnished fear in the eyes of the Kings Row residents facing eviction. Then she saw him. Elijah Reed, an architect whose passion seemed to violate the polished neutrality of his expensive suit, was standing on a cement barrier, arguing with a development rep. Elijah wasn't just passionate, he was furious. His gestures were wide, his voice resonant, articulating the systemic violence of gentrification with a precision Chloe usually reserved for her op-eds.
The term blighted area isn't descriptive, it's prescriptive. It's the language of a self-fulfilling prophecy designed to starve a neighborhood of resources so you can swoop in and call it renewal. We are building a city on truth, not on erasure.
When the police lines finally separated the protesters and the developers, Elijah looked physically drained. Chloe approached, drawn by an energy that felt dangerously compatible with her own.
You don't sound like most architects. You sound like you belong in the trenches.
Elijah turned. The exhaustion in his eyes vanished, replaced by a sudden recognizing spark. He saw her, not just the press badge, but the deep shared conviction beneath her professional facade.
And you don't sound like most reporters. You sound like someone who sees the structure, not just the scandal. You see the architectural violence.
That last phrase, architectural violence, ignited everything. It was the precise academic language he used to describe the racist outcomes of zoning. They exchanged numbers, feeling an instant sense of intellectual kinship that quickly spiraled into a consuming, desperate romance that felt, to both of them, like fate. Their love was a dazzling public display of ideological fusion. It was a rapid, intense merging of two worlds. Chloe's Kings Row, rich with color, history, and the comforting chaos of community, and Elijah's sleek, minimalist downtown loft, all steel, glass, and silent, inherited wealth. The shared altar, candlelight dinners where they didn't just eat, but debated. She introduced him to the agonizing nuance of James Baldwin. He countered with the hopeful, sustainable solutions of Jan Gehl. They weren't just two people. They were a thesis statement, proving that race, class, and political ideology could be transcended by shared commitment. The porch railing. Elijah didn't just fix the broken porch light at Chloe's mother, Mabel's house. He spent an entire weekend meticulously restoring the historical, chipped wooden railing. He was trying to mend the structural neglect of the neighborhood, one rail at a time, earning Mabel's watchful, cautious respect. He's decent, baby. But decency is cheap when your bank account is full. Love doesn't change the foundation, Chloe. You can't love away the debt he owes, said Mabel. Chloe dismissed the warning. In Elijah's arms, under the high ceilings of his immaculate loft, she felt an intoxicating sense of invincibility. They whispered late at night about leaving the city, about starting their own firm/publication dedicated entirely to equity. They were going to build a world where their love wasn't a symbol, but simply the norm. As Chloe dug deeper into the Kings Row story, linking Simon Vance's Concord Group to aggressive land acquisitions, Elijah's demeanor began to fracture. His professional world, which had once felt open and idealistic, became a walled garden. He was working impossible hours, citing mandatory design crises and emergency sessions with Vance. The passionate fire he had shown at the plaza was replaced by a haunted, low-grade stress. His phone, once carelessly discarded on the sofa, was now always face down or carefully locked in his backpack. If a text came in, he would excuse himself to the terrace. His custom leather work briefcase, containing blueprints and confidential papers, was no longer on the floor. It was meticulously placed, locked, on the highest shelf of his built-in closet, just out of easy reach. Their pillow talk stopped. When Chloe tried to pull him into a debate about zoning law, he would physically stiffen, turning away to stare at the city lights. His touch became hesitant, almost formal. Chloe's journalist intuition, honed over a decade of hunting for lies, began to scream. But this time, the rot wasn't in the city records. It was in the center of her life. She was caught in a tormenting cycle. Is he cheating? Or is he terrified of something I'm about to publish? The answer, she feared, was worse than either scenario alone. The suspicion was corrosive, eating away at the brilliant, shining myth they had built. One cold Tuesday, Elijah called, citing a mandatory, all-night structural review in the suburbs. The stress in his voice sounded genuine, yet the lie felt transparent. He didn't ask her to come. He didn't apologize for missing dinner. Chloe drove to his loft, using the excuse of dropping off a forgotten portfolio, but really driven by the cold, sick need to either confirm her fears or finally extinguish them. The loft was silent, the air conditioning whispering over the glass. She placed the portfolio down, but her feet carried her to the bathroom, an immaculate space of white marble and steel. Her eyes swept the vanity. There, tucked innocently behind a row of his high-end aftershave, was a small personalized vial of perfume. It was expensive, heavily floral, a scent that announced itself rather than blended. It was definitively, agonizingly not hers. The scent didn't just smell like betrayal, it smelled like an affirmation of her lowest value. The pain was so sharp, so complete, that it cleared her mind of emotional clutter. She didn't cry. She activated her journalistic hunting mode. She searched, not for a letter or a receipt, but for a connection. In the pocket of his discarded blazer, she found his key card, a magnetic pass granting access to the Concord Group's secured executive floor. Why would he leave this, she wondered? She looked at the high closet shelf, at the locked leather briefcase. It was the only thing standing between her and the whole truth. She grabbed the key card, the scent of the strange perfume still clinging to her fingertips, and drove straight to the Concord Group tower. The personal betrayal had become the key to unlocking the professional conspiracy. The executive floor was dark, silent, and intimidatingly wealthy. Chloe used the keycard to unlock Elijah's office. The lock clicked, a loud final sound. Elijah's private office was a monument to his design philosophies. Sleek, cold, and beautiful. She bypassed the briefcase. She had no time for brute force. She went straight to his desk. In a quiet corner nestled beside a stack of architectural awards, she found the photos, a series of candid shots from a recent firm retreat. They showed Elijah, not just smiling, but laughing intimately, with a tall, polished woman, Anna Martel, the Concord Group's senior legal counsel. In one photo, Anna was leaning in, her hand resting casually on his back. Chloe recognized the perfume. The affair wasn't with a bartender or a passing stranger. It was with the corporate infrastructure itself. Anna Martel represented the power, the money, and the stability of the elite world Elijah inherited. The affair wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a subconscious realignment with his privilege, a rejection of Chloe's messy, dangerous world of activism. Chloe's heart didn't just break. It hardened. This wasn't just infidelity. This was professional sabotage wrapped in romance. She violently slammed the desk drawer shut. The reverberation dislodged a thick Persian rug, revealing a slightly loose floorboard beneath. Driven by a vengeful certainty that the cheating and the corruption were linked, she leveraged the board up. Inside, hidden beneath the marble flooring, was a thin, gray encrypted drive and a single crumpled memo. She scanned the memo's stark corporate language. Use Reed's sustainable designs for Phase 2 rollout. Optics matter. Diversity shield confirmed. Anna Martel to manage all related legal defense for Reed's ethical positioning. The words were a physical blow. The diversity shield was Elijah, And the woman he was cheating with was the legal architect of the lie, tasked with managing his ethical positioning. He hadn't just used his proximity to her as an alibi. He had used his relationship with Anna to secure his silence and complicity. The heartbreak was total. Her love, her race, and her principles had all been weaponized. Chloe pocketed the drive labeled Aurora and the memo, her knees shaking not from fear, but from the horrifying realization that her romantic life and the destruction of her community were intrinsically tied by the same cold, calculating machine. The crack had become a chasm of absolute, irreparable betrayal. Chloe spent the next 24 hours operating on autopilot, fueled by the cold clarity of twofold betrayal. She confirmed the encrypted memo and the drive. It contained the full scope of the algorithmic racism, the same data Simon Vance would later use to blackmail Elijah. She met with Elias, the community organizer, revealing only the corporate corruption, omitting the personal agony of Anna Martell.
They're using predatory algorithms based on old redlining data. It's algorithmic racism. We have to move before the Concord Group files their injunctions. The data is all on this drive. AURORA.
Elias, staring at her hard, sensing the deeper trauma. This is beyond professional, Chloe. What happened?
He is compromised in a way that makes him a liability to the people of King's Row. I need to get this story out and secure the evidence.
She set up the final agonizing test for Elijah, fueled now not by residual hope, but by pure, surgical vengeance. She left the Aurora drive on his table, sharing the password post-racial myth 34. The password now held a terrible new irony. The belief in a post-racial world was a myth, and their love was the post-racial myth. Elijah returned home late, smelling faintly of the same cloying, expensive perfume Chloe had smelled in his bathroom. He found Chloe waiting for him in the center of the pristine, silent loft. She didn't scream about the affair first. She went for the deepest wound.
Diversity shield confirmed. That's what you were, Elijah. Not an ally, an alibi, an optical barrier. While you were sketching affordable housing, your firm was calling my community historically deferred residential zones.
Elijah crumpled, not daring to reach for her.
Chloe, please. I quit that project. I swear, I never intended.
No, you didn't intend to be racist. You just intended to be safe. And that safety is what led you to Anna Martell, didn't it? The Concord Group's legal counsel, the woman whose perfume you brought back to our home.
The color drained from Elijah's face. The shock of being caught in the romantic betrayal was almost worse than the corporate exposure. Elijah, falling to his knees, his hands covering his face in a grotesque act of shame.
It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. She represented the path of least resistance, the stability my family always demanded. It was just a distraction from the pressure. It meant nothing.
It meant everything. When your pressure rose, you didn't lean on me, your partner. You didn't lean on the truth. You ran to the establishment, to the woman who embodies the power you claim to fight. You didn't just cheat on my heart, Elijah. You cheated on our shared struggle. You chose the smooth, privileged lie over the messy, complicated truth of me.
He couldn't stand the truth of her words. He confessed to the affair, weeping for the loss of his moral center, begging her to understand the pressure he felt from Simon Vance. Then came the true, devastating blow. Simon Vance called, delivering the blackmail threat. The revelation of Councilman Reed's 1968 ordinance, and the threat to expose the family's blood money and ruin his mother.
I lost my moral compass the moment I ran to Anna. The shame of cheating made the second, deeper betrayal, selling your data to Vance, feel inevitable. I was already a traitor.
In a state of moral and emotional collapse, he chose to protect his family's historical lie, using the key post-racial myth 34 to betray Chloe's trust and send the Aurora data to Vance's legal team. He saved his mother, but he destroyed the last vestige of his dignity. Chloe's devastation. When Chloe learned the data was gone, the fact that Elijah had first betrayed her with Anna Martell, a woman he saw as his stable, safe path, made the systemic betrayal unbearable. It proved that he would always choose the path of his inherited privilege over her safety, her truth, and her love.
You didn't just cheat on me, Elijah. You cheated for them. You traded my data and our future for the price of your grandfather's racist inheritance and the touch of a woman who smells like the corporate lie. You get to keep your shame. You don't get to keep my forgiveness.
She left, knowing the heartbreak was complete. Her lover was a cheater, and the cheater was a corporate weapon. Chloe didn't grieve the loss of Elijah. She quarantined him. The heartbreak was a fuel, a searing clarity that focused her journalistic hunt. The betrayal had cost her the data, but it had handed her the most potent part of the story, the living, breathing manifestation of systemic racism, her own former fiancé. The Tribune's legal team immediately spiked her original piece, citing the preemptive injunctions filed by the Concord Group. The Tribune editor said to Chloe, "They have your data, Chloe. They know what you know. We publish, they bankrupt the paper, and burn your career to the ground. You have to pivot." Chloe found herself back in Elias's cramped Kings Row office, the air thick with desperation and the scent of old paper.
He sold the data, but he gave me the truth about his grandfather, Councilman Reed's 1968 rezoning ordinance. That's the real story. It proves the Kings Row devaluation was engineered, not organic decay. It proves Simon Vance is sitting on decades of blood money.
Elias blurted out to Chloe, "The councilman's records are gone, Chloe. Vance will deny everything. We need irrefutable physical proof that Vance is still using the 1968 plan to commit fraud today. The strategy pivot." Chloe realized her traditional approach was dead. She couldn't use the Tribune. She reached out to an old contact, a decentralized global platform specializing in exposing corporate malfeasance by using encrypted, untraceable drops. She would publish the story anonymously, targeting a global audience to create international pressure, bypassing local jurisdiction. She began writing the new piece, The Gilded Fault Line: How a Post-Racial Myth Masked a 50-Year Economic Hit on Kings Row. Her central piece of evidence would be the detailed, agonizing description of Elijah's betrayal, presenting him not as a villain, but as the unwilling avatar of inherited systemic guilt. Elijah was drowning in his loft. The sleek glass walls felt like the confines of an aquarium, trapping him beneath the crushing pressure of his guilt. He couldn't eat. He couldn't sketch. He had saved his mother's reputation, but only by destroying the only thing that gave his own life meaning. He had chosen the structural violence of his white lineage over the messy, complicated truth of love. He finally understood Chloe's final words. He had become the machine. His only escape was work, not architecture, but reverse architecture. He began to scrutinize the remaining structural schematics for the Concord Group's proposed luxury tower. He knew its secrets. Elijah spent 3 days locked in his dark office, fueled by black coffee and self-loathing, digging into the foundation plans. He wasn't looking for a mistake. He was looking for a fatal flaw in the system. He found it, buried deep in the engineering reports, a cost-cutting measure tied to the building's innovative but untested dynamic foundation anchor system. It was designed to save tens of millions by bypassing the need for traditional, deep bedrock anchoring. The only way the system was viable was if the ground beneath it was perfectly stable. Elijah knew from his own early fieldwork in Kings Row that the soil stability was compromised due to decades of deferred water pipe maintenance, a direct result of the 1968 rezoning that starved the neighborhood of funds. The water table fluctuated wildly. The dynamic anchor system would not hold over the long term. Simon Vance knew this too. He was building a structurally unsound tower, a financial ticking time bomb disguised as luxury housing. Elijah realized his path to redemption wasn't through confession, but through destruction. He couldn't save Kings Row, but he could make sure Simon Vance's monument to greed never stood. Elijah finally worked up the courage to confront his mother, Mabel Reed, about the 1968 documents. He drove to her beautiful, historical suburban home, a symbol of the wealth built from Kings Row's devaluation. Elijah's hands was visibly shaking, placing a printed copy of the rezoning ordinance on her antique table.
Simon Vance has the originals. He used this to blackmail me into destroying Chloe's investigation. Mom, tell me, did Grandpa really do this? Did he automate the destruction of a whole community to secure our future?
Mabel didn't flinch. She looked tired, ancient.
Yes, Elijah, he did. Your grandfather was a racist, yes, but he was also a pragmatist. He built this safe harbor for us, for his son. He told himself he was minimizing the damage compared to the open violence others planned. He told himself this lie until the day he died.
The insurance policy. Mabel stood up and walked to a built-in bookshelf, pulling down a heavy first edition architecture text. Inside, tucked into the spine, was a single fragile envelope. Mabel, turning to Elijah.
But he wasn't stupid, and he didn't trust Simon Vance. Simon helped him write the coded language, but he threatened to use it against Grandpa later. Your grandfather created an insurance policy, a clean slate, one final piece of documentation he hoped would never be needed.
Mabel handed Elijah a microfiche reel and a handwritten ledger.
This ledger, it's his personal record of all the Reed family's transactions with Simon Vance between 1985 and 1995. It details the payoffs, the property transfers, and the single biggest secret, a shell company called Aurora Holdings.
Elijah stared at the name, Aurora, the name of Chloe's lost file.
The shell company, Aurora Holdings, was how Vance laundered the initial massive capital injection that bought out the first 6 blocks of Kings Row in the early 90s. The source of that capital, Elijah, it wasn't American.
The controversial Global Fund. Elijah spent the next 48 hours running the names in the ledger. He tracked Aurora Holdings back to a colossal, notoriously opaque sovereign wealth fund based in a politically volatile nation currently facing massive international sanctions for human rights abuses. The Katian National Trust, KNT. The connection was devastatingly relevant. This was why Simon Vance had moved so fast. Katian sanctions. Deadline. The KNT was desperately trying to move billions in sanctioned funds into safe Western assets before an emergency UN measure froze their global holdings. The Kings Row luxury development was their last-minute high-yield escape route. The entire project was being fast-tracked to close in 48 hours, bypassing all ethical review. This explained the vanished city records, the aggressive injunctions, and the structural shortcuts, the dynamic anchor system. Vance was racing the clock of a major geopolitical crisis. If Elijah could prove Vance was knowingly laundering sanctioned foreign capital through a shell company named after his architectural designs and building a structurally compromised tower in the process, the entire project wouldn't just be delayed, it would collapse under international scrutiny. Elijah knew he couldn't contact Chloe directly. He was a liability, a documented traitor. But he needed her to weaponize this information, to turn the legal threat against the Tribune into a global expose. He used his technical knowledge of the city's infrastructure forums, the same forums they used to debate policy in the early days, to send a coded message. EXT, City Infrastructure Forum, post user E_R34 Elijah. Post, I have re-examined the dynamic anchor system. Structural integrity is compromised. The foundation will not hold in historically deferred residential zones due to water table volatility. The time to file a federal environmental safety report is before the KNT deadline, 48 hours. Elias, who had been obsessively monitoring all city forums, saw the post immediately. He knew ER34 was Elijah. Elias, showing Chloe the screen. Look at the syntax. He's talking to you. He's giving you the why of the collapse. And the KNT link, that's the global bomb. Chloe, her face emotionless, reading the implicit apology and the professional warning. He knows the cost. He's sacrificing his family's future to destroy Vance. We have to file a report on the structural instability, and then I publish the story. The federal report gives me legal cover. The KNT link gives us the headline the world can't ignore. The final element of the story was missing. A public confession of the 1968 ordinance. Chloe printed the ledger and the structural analysis. She walked to the Tribune. She submitted the full story to the anonymous global platform. Time to drop as soon as the federal safety report was filed. The final wrenching moment came when she found one last note tucked into her old copy of James Baldwin. A note written by Elijah, likely just before he plugged in the Aurora drive.
I am sorry, Chloe. I realized I was never your equal in this fight. I was merely the barrier you had to break to get to the truth. When the truth comes out, remember, the love was real. The shame is realer. I will carry it.
Chloe took a breath, the ache of the lost love hitting her one last time. She had her story. She had her proof. Now she had to face the consequences. City Hall was crazy. Everyone was rushing because the big land deal with the foreign bank, KTN National Trust, KNT, was set to be approved in just 2 hours. Lots of money and secret kickbacks were involved. Chloe and Elias, her friend from the neighborhood, moved fast. Elias had filed a secret report based on the coded message Elijah sent, showing that the giant tower's concrete base was weak and dangerous for Kings Row ground. This safety report didn't kill the deal, but it gave them a mandatory 24-hour stop, just barely. Simon fights back. The stop made Simon Vance, the boss, explode with anger. He found Chloe alone. Simon, you think this is over. I know your architect boyfriend gave you that report. He sold out his own family to try and fix your broken love. Pathetic. I have a judge signing a paper right now to ignore that safety report. The money is moving. Vance stepped closer, his voice low and evil. Simon, I've already told the news that the Reed family, Elijah's family, are the real racists, going back to 1968. I am the good guy, exposing your ally's ugly past. You wrote a story about greed. I'm going to write one about a black reporter being used by a racist white family. Chloe, calm despite the terror.
You're too late. I already told the truth.
Chloe pointed to a group of reporters staring at their phones. Her secret article, titled The Gilded Fault Line, had just gone worldwide. It showed everything, the money laundering, the weak tower base, and the racist computer rules used to ruin the neighborhood. It also published the whole story of Elijah's cheating and betrayal, calling it the ultimate price of redemption. Vance saw the phone screens and went white. The news was everywhere instantly. Elijah was already gone from his perfect apartment. He hadn't seen the news, but he knew the battle was ending. He stood in the silent, cold loft, a symbol of his old, fake life, and placed 2 items on his drafting table. One was the old family ledger proving his grandfather's crimes. The other was a single signed page, a full public confession. Elijah, reading his words out loud, accepting his fate. My name is Elijah Reed. I used my inherited privilege to hurt the woman I love and the community she lives in. I am guilty of structural and personal betrayal. He grabbed a heavy steel hammer. He didn't break the glass windows. He walked to his own drafting table, the place where he designed his beautiful lies, and brought the hammer down over and over, smashing the table, the laptop, and all his blueprints. He destroyed his career, his identity, the only way he knew how to pay for the damage. Vance was panicking. He raced to the construction site to force the workers to speed up before the deal stopped completely. Chloe and Elias were already waiting. They stood near the muddy pit, staring at the useless construction cranes. Vance, shouting, face red with rage, "Get off my property! You're attacking honest business with fake hate." Chloe, holding the ledger, wind whipping her hair. The FBI is already here, Vance. You used the foreign bank to hide money. Your company is finished. A black car pulled up. Elijah stepped out. He looked broken and resolved. The public sacrifice. Elijah ignored Vance and walked to Chloe, stopping a few feet away, a wall of pain between them. Elijah, voice loud enough for the press and police to hear.
I am the rest of the story.
He showed his signed confession and read the entire, horrible truth about the affair with the lawyer, the coded land ordinance from 1968, and the money his family made from ruining Kings Row. Vance, shrieking, lunging at Elijah. "You traitor! I'll make sure you pay for this." Vance was hauled away by police. Elijah put the confession on the ground and looked at Chloe one last time. Elijah. The truth is all that's left. He turned and walked straight to the waiting police, giving himself up for every lie and crime his family had made him part of. The fallout was a national earthquake. Vance went to jail. The King's Row Tower was canceled. Chloe's article won the Pulitzer Prize, the highest award in journalism. The award money was used to start a trust fund, buying the land back for the community. King's Row was saved. Elijah served 6 months in prison and was released, having lost his inheritance, his career, and his name. He was last seen working far away, building simple, honest homes for the poor, his penance. Chloe is at the Tribune office, looking at the city skyline. She is successful, respected, and untouchable. Elias walks in. Elias. The community center is opening next week. You did it, Chloe. You saved King's Row. Chloe, nodding a cold victory. It was done. Elias, he's asking to see you. Elijah, just for 10 minutes. Chloe looked out at the skyline. The victory felt hollow, clean, and totally lonely. She had won the war for justice, but the price of that win was the total ruin of the man she loved. Chloe, a deliberate final choice.
Tell him no. Tell him I don't need to see him. He was just the sacrifice needed to fix the city.
And that's all on today's episode of Cheater's Diary. If you were caught up in this emotional mess, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe right now. Every week, we pull back the curtain on real stories of infidelity, heartbreak, and the painful aftermath of betrayal. Until next time, stay safe and be honest.